Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Shravanam Diaries Podcast.
Reading Bhagavad Gita as it is, the book by His Divine Grace Abhay Charanaravinda Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada, Chapter 5, Karma Yoga Action in Krishna Consciousness, Text 15, Purport. Yesterday we stopped at a point where Srila Prabhupada explains that the Lord does not create a particular situation for any living entity, but the living entity, bewildered by ignorance, desires to be put into certain conditions of life, and thereby his chain of action and reaction begins. Continuing. A living entity is by superior nature full of knowledge. Nevertheless, he is prone to be influenced by ignorance due to his limited power. The Lord is omnipotent, but the living entity is not. The Lord is Vibhu, or omniscient, but the living entity is Anu, or atomic. Because he is a living soul, he has the capacity to desire by his free will. Such desire is fulfilled only by the omnipotent Lord. And so, when the living entity is bewildered in his desires, the Lord allows him to fulfill those desires. But the Lord is never responsible for the actions and reactions of the particular situation which may be desired. Being in a bewildered condition, therefore, the embodied soul identifies himself with the circumstantial material body and becomes subjected to the temporary misery and happiness of life. The Lord is the constant companion of the living entity as Paramatma, or the Supersoul, and therefore he can understand the desires of the individual soul as one can smell the flavor of a flower by being near it. I always liked this particular analogy. Imagine, sometimes in Mayapur you pass on a scooter near Parijata tree during Kartik month. And Parijata tree, I don't know what is its name, its proper name, but they call it Parijata tree over here, but it has this very sweet flavor, like the smell, the fragrance. And you pass by and you just involuntarily you stop because wow, so there's some flowers that just smell so nice. So imagine the Supreme Lord, the Super Soul, is in your heart, right? In our heart there are two birds sitting on a tree. Two souls, your soul, you, basically you, and the Super Soul, the Supreme Lord. And the Supreme Lord is right next to you, and he can understand your desires. Just like one can smell the flavor of a flower by being near it. You're near it, okay? So in the 11th canto, if I'm not mistaken, it's 11th or is it 10th canto, is described that the soul is constantly active, and it speaks 4 languages. One of them is perceived as sound, and 3 of them remain silent. And I think we mentioned it sometime earlier, maybe like a year ago, but we will come back to that. So, and in Bhagavad Gita, Prabhupada many times he lists these 3 silent languages that the soul speaks as thinking, feeling, and willing. Thinking, feeling, and willing. The soul is constantly doing that. Thinking, feeling, and willing. And then when it reaches a certain stage, or when we manifest it outside, we say, Hare Krishna, this is what I want. This is the fourth one, when it manifests into the sound externally. The Lord, He can feel, He can smell, He can hear all of it. He can feel how we are thinking, He can feel how we are feeling, He can feel how we are willing. He's our constant companion. And as we desire, as we think, as we feel, we create certain situations of our life. Okay. And the Lord always feels that. Just like, just to realize that. Hare Krishna. I can say a lot of things about it, but I really want to stick to the relevance to the purport. Okay, continuing. Desire is a subtle form of conditioning for the living entity. The Lord fulfills His desire as He deserves. Man proposes and God disposes. The individual is not, therefore, omnipotent in fulfilling his desires. The Lord, however, can fulfill all desires, and the Lord, being neutral to everyone, does not interfere with the desires of the minute, independent living entities. However, when one desires Krishna, the Lord takes special care and encourages one to desire in such a way that one can attain to Him and be eternally happy. One thing I do when I'm trying to chant my rounds, my japa, chanting Mahamantra, the holy names, is I understand that, the mind is like, Prabhupada describes, the mind is like a wild animal, constantly wanting to run away to some forest. So if I'm not able to concentrate while on the sound vibration, I try to shift to just me desiring to serve, because the meaning of the mantra is, my dear Lord, my dear energy, please engage me in your service. So when I switched that, like the feeling of desire, then it becomes somewhat like the tuning is more into the realm of focusing on the holy names. So, and sometimes, like when I find myself in situations where it's just something so hopeless, or like a situation of disaster, or a situation of catastrophe, or a situation of just I find it difficult to cope. I try to make it a point that just if you desire to serve Krishna in any situation, if you just desire that, then somehow, just like Prabhupada says here, the Lord takes special care. Some special care is just, like coming from all directions. It's true. And then some encouragement. Okay. The Vedic hymns therefore declare, Esha uhyeva sadhu karma karayati tam yam hebyo lokebya uninishate. Esha o eva sadhu karma karayati yam madho ninishate. Quote, the Lord engages the living entity in pious activities so that he may be elevated. The Lord engages him in impious activities so that he may go to hell. Unquote. Kaushitaki Upanishad 3.8. Agyo jantura nishoyam atmana sukha dukhaya Ishvara prerito gachet svargam vashvabharam evacha. Quote, the living entity is completely dependent in his distress and happiness. By the will of the Supreme, he can go to heaven or hell, as a cloud is driven by the air. Unquote. Therefore, the embodied soul, by his immemorial desire to avoid Krishna consciousness, causes his own bewilderment. Consequently, although he is constitutionally eternal, blissful, and cognizant, due to the littleness of his existence, he forgets his constitutional position of service to the Lord, and is thus entrapped by nescience. And, under the spell of ignorance, the living entity claims that the Lord is responsible for his conditional existence. Okay. The Vedanta Sutras 2.1.34 also confirm this. Vishamya nairgrinyena sapekshatvat tathahi darshayati. Quote, the Lord neither hates nor likes anyone, though he appears to. Unquote. Wow. Okay, first of all, I wanted to highlight the beginning of this paragraph, that therefore the embodied soul, by his immemorial desire to avoid Krishna consciousness, basically our desire to avoid God, our desire to avoid Krishna, is the cause of our bewilderment. We've desired since time immemorial to avoid Krishna. Now let that sink in. And that's the only reason of this entire material existence of ours. So basically, spiritual life is that constantly desiring to be with Krishna, constantly desiring to serve Krishna throughout any situations, whatever situations come. And then this is second point. Prabhupada says that under the spell of ignorance, the living entity claims that the Lord is responsible for his conditional existence. So we're like, Krishna, I don't want to see you. I don't want to know you. I don't want to have anything to do with you. And then we're like, it's your fault. It's like, what? You desire that. That's why you're not Krishna conscious. You've desired it for a long, long time. And it makes sense that now that you try to turn your face towards the Lord, now that we're trying to develop Krishna consciousness, it takes time for us to constantly make those endeavors to desire and desire and desire. And even though we are still facing some consequences due to our previous material existence, we can't blame the Lord and make him responsible for our conditional existence. This is something that we yesterday we stopped at this point, and today we're also concluding at this point. The Lord is not responsible. He doesn't create some particular situation for us to mess up our spirituality, to mess up our life, basically. And the very fact that we blame Krishna in doing that is exactly why we are under the spell of ignorance. It proves that we are in ignorance. Okay. So, I would like to conclude the episode. I would like to stop here at this point because this is such a deep topic, and I would like to conclude the meditation here. And remember that Krishna, the Supreme Lord, is in your heart, and he can feel everything you think, feel, desire, will to do. Your thinking, feeling, willing, desires, everything. He can feel it. just like you can smell a flower. And he's been doing that since time immemorial. And he fulfills all of our desires as much as we deserve. Haribo! But if we desire him, we're saying, Krishna, you know what? I want you. But imagine this, that there's someone and you keep fulfilling their desires since time immemorial. And they're like, I want to have nothing to do with you. And you're like, okay, you will have nothing to do with me. But technically, you have everything to do with him because, we're switching the roles. Technically, he has everything to do with you because you're the one fulfilling his desires. So he's saying, I don't want to have anything to do with you. And you're like, fine. But even for that desire to fulfill, you have to do it. So Krishna is fulfilling our desires to forget him. But he is still with us. I remember this example that my Guru Maharaj gives. It's really powerful. He says that imagine you have a friend and you're best friends. You're like BFFs forever, right? But in next lifetime, your BFF is born as a cockroach. Would you be willing to be born as a cockroach with him? And he's like I'm not sure if you would be. Or if he is like some other more disgusting insect. I will not name it. He's like, but Krishna is willing to go anywhere with us. Whether we were an insect, a cockroach, or bacteria in some impure place. Krishna has been with us the entire time. And he's fulfilling all of our desires. We want to enjoy like this, we want to enjoy like that. But basically we're suffering in this material world. And he's with us. And he's just there, fulfilling all of our desires. But as soon as we desire him, you're like, you know what, Krishna, I want you. I want to serve you. Then Krishna, he takes special care. And he encourages us to desire him more, to attain him, and to be eternally happy with him. Jai. Now this is a meditation. Thank you so much for tuning in today. The book links, previous episodes timeline, and biography of the author can be found on shravanamdiaries.com. The link is in the description, and we shall see you tomorrow. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare.